We're pretty close. Not sure what's going on. He does not want to move. Hey guys, thanks for joining me down here in Florida. I'm practicing for the first pro circuit event of the year, trying to kick it off on a high note. Lake Okeechobee, not been super great so far. Still early in practice though, but I just wanted to take a second to give you guys a little bit of a tip when flipping a big weight. You know, one of the things that I really like to do down here is flip a big weight, and it generates good strikes, but it's a good way to target specific, specific small spots where you think the fish are setting up. And one tip I want to give you is when you pitch your bait out there, don't just yo-yo the whole time. Give it 3 or 4 yo-yos and then pull it in. I mean, that generates strikes, but one thing that works really well up here in Florida is when you pull it up to the surface, like you want to hit the top of the mat and like drop it an inch or two and then just shake it under the mat, and then drop it back down, and then bring it back up and shake it right under the mat. And what happens with that is you've got your bait, so you're pulling it up. If my hand is the top of the mat, you pull it up and then you're shaking it right here under the mat. What that looks like is a bluegill or a shad that's coming to peck at a bug or some sort of food source under the mat. So they're sitting up here feeding around, going like that. So when you have your bait up there, it mimics a bluegill really well. A lot of times the bass will come up and bite at that point. So if you're not generating strikes by just straight yo-yoing, try bringing it up to the surface and just shaking it. The opposite works really well too for fishing up north. When you're in some deeper topped out milfoil mats, I do not find that works well when you're in, say, 8 feet of water. The fish aren't up on the surface up north. Normally they're down in the bottom. So, the opposite works too. So when you're yo-yoing it, if you're not getting bit, let it fall to the bottom and just let it dead stick it on the bottom. Give it, a few minutes, or not a few minutes, a few seconds, and then move it around again. And I find that triggers fish up north. It doesn't work quite as well down here in Florida, and I think a big difference is down here in Florida, a lot of times the bottom's softer and your bait just kind of blends in and there's a lot of weeds and stuff. When you're up north in that milfoil, that bait is falling to the bottom, and the milfoil normally grows in a little harder bottom. And at the same time, the key to fishing milfoil is you want to try to find hard bottom, some rock mixed in. So you usually have some cleaner bottom there, and I think when the bait's sitting on the bottom, you're mimicking a crawfish. But those are two really good things to trigger bites if just the basic flipping, and yo-yoing isn't working. And when you're down here in Florida, or yo-yoing in general, you definitely want to have a pretty heavy stout setup. I've got here, this is an MHX rod that I built. It's an FP 936. So it's one of their heavier flipping models. I mean, this is made for up to 2-ounce baits. It's a 7.9, and it's a really big stiff rod, but it's got a very moderate taper. So it's got a lot of that bend in the midsection, which is what you want when you're flipping. If you've got too fast of a rod in this heavy stuff, what'll happen is you'll pull that bait out of the fish's mouth more times than not, and a lot of times you'll just end up losing them as well when you're fighting it, because you're not able to absorb the fight nearly as much when you've got 12 pounds of weeds mixed in your rod. So, you know, you definitely want to have a more moderate speed rod when you're doing this flipping. And then I really like, you know, another key that I like is this Revo Rocket. You know, this is a super fast reel that it's got, you know, amazing line pickup. You know, in this case, this is the I believe it's the 10-to-1 model. Yeah, 10-to-1, and it's got 41 inches of pickup per reel turn. And the reason that I like that is because I can make so many pitches. You know, when you pitch out there and you're done with it, it's like 3 cranks of the reel and I'm already in my next motion for my next pitch. So, you know, keep that in mind too. You definitely want a higher speed reel and a more moderate speed rod. And, you know, those two working together will be great. The last piece of advice that I can give you, let's see if I can pop you off this, is when you're fishing in Florida, you want to have a lot of different type of cover around. So you can see here, you know, in this case, we've got all different stuff. We've got hay grass, cattails. Down here, you can see these are arrowheads. You know, you've got pennywort, some hyacinth, you got all kinds of stuff mixed in. And what's really, really important here is 2 things. One, you got to know your weeds. So in this case, this is arrowhead. An arrowhead will grow in hard bottom areas, just like round reed or buggy whips will. And the key with that is they like to spawn around that. The other key in this area is you can see all these little holes. You got all these holes built in. A lot of times those holes are there because they're beds. So the fish have actually, like down here, they could clean out an area, or this area between the arrowheads and the hay grass. So like, you know, when you see a bare hole like that, a lot of times that's because a fish has completely cleaned that out. Now, I mean, there's 20 good looking holes right in this area. They're probably not all beds, but there may be 1 or 2 in here. Guys, here's one more important tidbit when you're flipping a heavy weight. So I'm going down this stretch right here, and you can see my shadow is right here. So a lot of people will ask me, you know, how far should you pitch back into the mats? And really what it comes down to for me is the sun position. So because the sun's on this side of me, you can see it's almost at a perfect 90-degree angle to the boat. My shadow's out here. So if I'm fishing this side, which is the ideal side, I'm gonna be fishing all the shaded stuff. So that sun's hitting it and coming down. The shadow from the mat is actually coming way down, probably to about where the boat is. So in that case, I'm usually flipping the edge. But in this case, if I were flipping this side, you can see, so I'm 6'4", I'm standing on the deck of my boat. I'm probably close to 8 feet tall right now. And my shadow's probably, you know, 8 to 9 feet out. So what that means is if I'm in 4 feet of water, there's like a 1-to-1 ratio. You're gonna need to pitch 4 feet into the mat to get to the point where that shade line hits the bottom. And I think you want to be at least 4 feet back if you're doing that. You know, it's kind of like if you were sitting under a tree, you're not gonna sit so that your legs are in the sun. You're gonna sit so your whole body's in the shade, but you may not go, you know, right to the center of the shade. You're just gonna go enough to the point where you're inside of the shade line. And I think the fish are the same way. They want that shade line to go to the bottom, and then they'll sit just inside that. So in this case, if I'm in 4 feet of water, the shade line's probably gonna be about 4 feet back. I wanna pitch probably to that 5 or 6 foot range into the mat. It's just a little piece of information that I think is important. Ideally, if you can fish the shaded side, that's always the best, but you know, you don't always have that opportunity based on sun position and what part of the day it is. So next time you're out throwing a big weight around, give it a try. And thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate watching the videos.